they've been pretty busy lately, so I'm going to talk on their behalf to present the fishery and give you a little bit of background history of that fisheries and about the depredation, current levels, and the trends in this depredation. So the areas we are talking about here are actually two EEZs. These are the Crozet and the Kerguelen EEZs. These are French. It's been within camera areas 58.6 for the Crozet Islands and 58.5.1 for the Kerguelen Island. And this is how it looks like. These are the EEZ boundary for the Kerguelen Island. We share the same plateau as the Australian islands, Heard and McDonald Islands down south, and the Crozet Islands, sorry, are more to the west of the Kerguelen Island. And in terms of history, fishing started with trawling for the Patagonian toothfish, and that was back in the early 1990s. And longlining started in 1993 for the Kerguelen Island. And in 1996, there was a tremendous illegal activity going on, both in the Kerguelen Island and in the Crozet Island. And the peak, the high rate of illegal fishery occurred in 1997, just like in the Crozet, in the Mayan and Prince Edward Island. For the Crozet Island, longlining started in 1996 as well, and illegal activity also has been going on in the late 1990s. And in both areas, they managed to get that illegal activity almost stopped in 2002. The French government started to implement a big surveillance and satellite tracking means to reduce illegal activity. They also sent some Navy vessels down the Crozet and the Kerguelen EEZs to repel those poaching vessels from the area. So now it's only longlining occurring with licensed vessels. We have a total of 7 vessels that are each operated by the French skipper. And because those vessels are within the camera area and the French government is actually managing those 2 areas, we got 100% observer coverage. And the TAC for the Crozet are about 750 tons, that was last year, and the Kerguelen 5,100 tons. The system they use is an autoline system, and the observers are usually trained by the Museum of Natural History of Paris. This is where Nicolas Gasco is working for. And with such a high TAC, usually the vessels, they go at sea for about 3 months, and they're gonna fish all year round. The only exception is that the Kerguelen Island fishing grounds are closed for fishing because of bird issues from the 1st of February to the 15th of March. Otherwise, fishing vessels are allowed to operate all year round in those 2 areas. And depredation was actually reported as soon as the first longliners started to operate into those 2 areas. In both areas, we got reports of the 2 species, sperm whales and killer whales, but I will show you that later. On the Kerguelen Island, it's mostly the sperm whale activity going on, and of the Crozet Islands, both species at very high levels. Actually, of the Crozet Island, the killer whales are present on more than 35–40% of all the longline hauling events. And the sperm whales are more than 60%. The 2 species usually co-occur are present simultaneously around the fishing vessels in nearly 30% of all the longline sets that are hauled aboard. So yeah, that makes that Crozet situation quite a pretty unique situation, not a very good situation. Actually, it's one of the highest interaction rates of marine mammals with the fisheries down in the Southern Ocean. Eventually, that leaves only 27% of the longline sets that are actually hauled without any marine mammal around. The Kerguelen situation is quite different. It's actually very interesting in terms of behavior of those marine mammals, because it's not very far away from the Crozet Islands. It's about 700 kilometers away. But the killer whale depredation is extremely low. Killer whales are almost never observed around fishing vessels. And, well, it's actually a good thing, because most of the quota for the French fishery is made of the Kerguelen Island, which is much bigger fishing ground. And there, the main issue comes from sperm whales. Sperm whales are going to interact with about 40% of all the longline sets around the Kerguelen Island. We started some basic representations of these interaction rates that was from the data that was collected by fishery observers. I'm not going to go into details here because we've got several presentations coming up this afternoon and tomorrow with Nicholas as well. But yeah, that gives you an idea of how depredation, how interactions between marine mammals and fisheries are spatially distributed around those fishing grounds. And for the sperm whales, it's pretty much everywhere. But there are some hot spots of depredation that we were able to emphasize using a long-term data set. So both on of the Crozet and the Kerguelen Island, which is interesting with the Kerguelen Island, and I think Dirk is going to talk about that regarding the Australian waters, is that most of the sperm whale depredation occurs in the north part of the fishing grounds, and the less depredation is going on in the southern part, close to the Australian EZ. Of the Crozet Island, this is where the main killer whale activity occurs, and same thing, you can't see it because it's not zoomed enough, but there are also hotspots of killer whale depredation. I'm going to go into more details later today. And as I said, very few depredation events of killer whales of the Kerguelen Island. And about this, the fishery has been extremely careful not to to prevent the killer whales from developing depredation around the Kerguelen Island. If we reach a similar level of depredation by killer whales in both areas, Crozet and Kerguelen, that will be, according to the fishing industry, almost the end of it, because the Kerguelen Island, it's the major fishing ground, and the sperm whale depredation is an issue, but the killer whale is not yet. So what they are doing right now is to prevent by abandoning any fishing gear every time they see killer whales, and it's going to be about 2 or 3 times a year. And what we're trying to do is to implement a non-reward policy for the killer whales to develop depredation there. In terms of time series of those interaction rates, nothing has changed much actually over the past 12 years. It has remained quite high over the time, this is the sperm whale depredation at the very top in orange. And you see there are some variations, but usually it remains above 60% of the longline sets with the presence of sperm whales. Of the Crozet, it's about the same between the two species, and not much variations except for some years, which are interesting to investigate further, but it's about 40% for killer whales and about 50% of every fishing event of the Crozet Islands for sperm whales. And for the Kerguelen Island, very low levels for the killer whale activity. All right, that's it for now. Thank you.